So welcome to this in our occasional series of lunchtime seminars for Safer Dance. My name is Peter Flew. I'm the chair of Safer Dance, and also a trustee of the Royal Academy of Dance and Dean of the School of Education at Roehampton University. I'd like to welcome Kath and Laura from the Anne Craft Trust, and we're going to be talking about adult safeguarding today for the next hour. It's going to be more of a conversation and some information. There is a chat for you to ask questions or a Q&A. It's a chat thing you can ask in, or a Q&A thing, and we'll be watching those as they go along. A little bit of an introduction about Safer Dance. A few of us founded Safer Dance in 2020 when we realised, well, I realised, not as a dancer, that there was no regulation of the dance industry. And as a safeguarding expert, I thought, what can I do as a university academic to support the information sharing, education of dance teachers, lobby for better safeguarding with government, and generally try and share the good message that safeguarding is not difficult, and it's especially if it's done properly. And we have an ultimate aim to make sure that any child who goes to a dance school outside the professional vocational schools in the UK is safe from harm. It's a big target, but we are chipping away at it. As well as children, in our terms of reference, we talk about adults at risk. And so this is a really ideal time to introduce the Anne Craft Trust, which I'm sure Kath will do. So Kath is I've written it down here. Kath is the Safeguarding Adults Manager for Sport and Activity at the Anne Craft Trust, and Laura is General Safeguarding Adults Manager for the Anne Craft Trust as well. So welcome, everybody. Welcome, Kath. Welcome, Laura.
Hi.
So,
Hi, everyone.
Introduce the Anne Craft Trust.
Brilliant. So so I'm Kath Sykes, and as Peter said, I'm one of the Safeguarding Adults in Sport Managers, focusing on the sport and activity sector. So I've been working to support Peter over the last few years, and Peter sort of belongs to the forum. Just a little bit about me. So originally from the voluntary and community sector, started my career as a qualified youth and community worker, so really sort of working out and about in the field. Worked for national youth organisations probably for the last 20 years, really then taking on the role as safeguarding officer, working with the sort of the 18 to 24-year-old age range. Have been a lead safeguarding officer for many years, and that has included a whole range of different things, whether it's leading case management groups, setting up panel meetings, all the way through to the preventative work, so writing policy, writing strategies, making sure that everything that's written in legislation is tangible and relevant to different user groups as well. I was recently the lead safeguarding officer for Canoe Wales as well, so I took on that role, and then have been working with the Anne Craft Trust for 3 years. And my role here is slightly different. So it's working with the sport and activity sector, which isn't necessarily a traditional sports organisation such as badminton or volleyball, for example. So it encompasses a whole range of different organisations, dance being one, yoga, professional wrestling, which is an interesting conversation in itself, whether that's sport or theatre. All the way through to Nordic walking, skydiving, sub-aqua swimming, croquet, for example. So actually it's a whole range of different organisations. But interestingly, a lot of the conversations we have are quite common within that as well. So it's really trying to drive that forward. So that's just a little bit about me. And Laura, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself as well, and then I can talk about the Anne Craft Trust.
Yes, of course. How do I follow that? Wow. So I'm Laura Thorpe. I'm Safeguarding Adults Manager for the Anne Craft Trust, which is just general, because actually the amount of different organisations that we reach is enormous. I've been in the Anne Craft Trust for about 5 years. My background is working with adults within generally health and social care, so adults with learning disabilities, mental health issues, etc. And then moving on into learning and development departments of those kinds of industries. When I first started with the Anne Craft Trust, a lot of our training delivery, I deliver training, we do audits, those kinds of things. That was very much health and social care based. But in the last sort of few years, the way that it's expanded is staggering, really. So we deliver a lot of training and audits for theatres, so physical theatres, drama schools, community theatre. We've even done some work with the BAFTAs, lots of different organisations like that. But then also construction, haulage, agriculture, basically you name it, we've worked with them in helping them to find a safeguarding procedure and approach and culture that suits them and is relevant to their industry. So I find that really exciting, working with lots of different kinds of people. So yeah, hi everybody. Thanks, Kath.
Brilliant, thanks Laura. And then just to say a little bit about the Ancraft Trust. So we're quite a small charity, a national charity, and we're based at Nottingham University within the Law and Social Policy Department there, but we are an independent charity. We're still quite a new charity, so we've been running for 30 years now, originally set up by Dr. Ancraft, who really focused on sort of the sexual abuse of adults and children who had learning disabilities. So that's how it was sort of instigated. And then from then it moved over into the charity. And with that, it widened its reach. So it talked about safeguarding all types of abuse, so not just sexual, but actually reaching over into the other areas and other categories of abuse as well. So we're quite a small staff team, but we cover a lot of different sectors, as Laura said, which is really good because we tend to pool our sort of knowledge and resources and share that out as well. So as an organisation, we are set up to help organisations minimise risk of harm and abuse within for all their participants and their staff, their volunteers, their coaches, their referees, their dance instructors, whoever that might be. And through that, we offer it through a whole range of different services. So we carry out audits. So we've been asked to go in, unfortunately, where things might have gone wrong. We carry out full audits in those situations. We also carry out audits before things go wrong as well to look at gaps and try and meet those needs. We also have a number of different tools and resources available. So we have a framework which is set up for those who are funded through Sport England, again, to help organisations on their journey to safeguard adults. And we have the roadmap, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We also provide consultancy and have a suite of different training resources. So we provide e-learning courses in bite-sized modules. So we have basic introduction to safeguarding adults. We have financial abuse model. We have the Mental Capacity Act. So actually there's a whole range there. And also we do bespoke training, so online classrooms and face-to-face training. Laura, is there anything I've forgotten?
No, I don't think so. The only thing I would say is that we monthly deliver online for designated safeguarding leads to get the skills that they need. So that will be, it's an open training, we call it. So that each person on that course will be from many, many different organisations. So that's a really useful one. It gives people all the skills they need if they have been given that particular role that can be a bit scary at the beginning. Thanks, Kath.
Thank you. So Kath, I mean, when I create safeguarding policies, we're always thinking about children. And then when you think about safeguarding, you think, oh, are we only talking about adults at risk? But what does safeguarding adults mean in your world?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting, and it just does generate a lot of conversation. Just looking to see where the journey has come. I think we're all really quite used to now thinking about safeguarding and safeguarding children, as you said, and we put those policies and procedures in to protect children from harm and escalate that when serious situations come through. When we talk about safeguarding adults, this has been on a journey. So back in 2000, we had the No Secrets Guidance, which was governmental guidance. And in that, it talked about the vulnerable adult. And that was very much focused on being a reactive response and putting measures in place when things have gone wrong. What do we need to put in place to protect that person from harm? So it's very sort of working towards outcomes rather than working with the adult of concern. As things have moved on, we then moved towards the Care Act in 2014, and actually that's when the terminology began to change and where the adult at risk began to come through as well. And this was quite a significant change in thought, and it was very much about including the adult in the conversation. It's being that proactive approach, making sure that adults' wishes are included. And when we talk about the definition of adult at risk, actually that's a very small proportion of people, because they have to be over the age of 18, they have to have care and support needs, whether that's met by the local authority or not, and they have to be experiencing or at risk of harm. So actually the threshold's quite high. And one thing that we've noticed really following on sort of from the pandemic as well, that actually when we're talking about safeguarding adults, it's not necessarily their characteristics which make them prone to safeguarding, but it's the circumstance and the situation that they find themselves in. So, for example, during lockdown, a lot of people were very isolated, that loneliness came through. So there was a sort of really, the risk of that vulnerability factor really increased. And we did hear about reports of domestic abuse and violence, for example, coming through. So in the Ancraft Trust, we've really sort of taken the stance that what we need to have in place and help organisations have is that blanket, that network, that safety net in place, so that if any adult comes to us who might be at risk of harm or abuse, doesn't matter if they're meeting this category of an adult at risk, actually we need to know what to do to support these people, because looking at somebody within a room, you don't know if they have care and support needs. They may not, but they might still be subject to abuse. So again, it's making sure that what we have in place will support those people. Not everyone will need safeguarding, but we all need to have the right approaches in place. Does that help? I have got a graphic if that helps.
Yeah.
Want me to share it? Yeah. Let me just share my screen. And Laura, please chip in if I've missed anything.
The only thing I was going to add is that under the Care Act, it talks about the fact that safeguarding is everybody's business and everyone has got a role to play. And as Kath said, the actual amount of people that might meet the criteria of an adult at risk is very small, but there's so much that we can do to support people. So a lot of the work and training and guidance that I give is actually around signposting. So making sure that as an organisation, if you're worried about someone, you've got a ream of resources that you could say, well, could you contact this charity or this organisation? So it's showing that, you know, we all have a role to play and we can all help.
So is it a question of, if you're running a dance class and you're running dance class for adults, is to being aware that even though they maybe not be defined as an adult at risk, they may be a victim of domestic abuse. So you are in a position to spot the signs. They could disclose something and you can signpost them. Is that the sort of thing?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And, you know, if a person doesn't meet criteria, it can be a complex area. A person has the right to make decisions that we don't agree with, stay in that situation, etc. But we may well want to help and support them by having those resources that we can signpost them to. There was just a question in the chat box, Kath, and somebody said an adult at risk may not actually be in receipt of services but eligible for them. And that's a really important point.
Absolutely. And what we've got on the screen here is it's just quite a useful graphic, and one that we tend to use in training. So the outer green circle sort of represents all the adults in the population, which I think, what's the population of the UK? 58 million, something like that. So what we need to do is have procedures in place for all adults, but a smaller proportion of those might be at risk of harm and neglect, as we've said before. And as we move right into the middle bit, this is where the section 42 applies. So it's those people who have those care and support needs, are unable to protect themselves over the age of 18. So when you're talking about the threshold, it is that very small amount of people. And I think last year there are about 600,000 referrals to the adult safeguarding team, but only 200,000 of those actually met the threshold. So for that 400,000, the question is, what happened to those people? And there's a whole number of different reasons for that. It might be that the information wasn't correctly filled, or it might be that they're already on the system, they're already known, so they're already getting that support. Or it might be actually in those situations, as Laura said, really using those third sector, those fantastic charities to signpost people to get that bespoke support as well. So hopefully that's just quite a useful visual for people.
Sorry. I just wanted to say, Peter, another comment in the chat box came through. I can see them popping up, saying, is your signposting resources list available on your website? And it is. So we've got a directory, and I'm more than happy to send that to Peter or Kath could. What we always recommend, though, our directory is national, but it'd be really useful for you to just research a couple of phone numbers or whatever for local, your local mental health crisis team, or something along those lines, so that it's relevant for where you actually are. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. So, what is it like in practice, actually thinking about safeguarding, and do you need a policy for it in your organisation?
Yeah, and I think this is where we begin to really try and educate people, because when we're talking about safeguarding children and safeguarding adults, they're very distinct and very different in terms of the policy and process that you go through. So for the adults, we refer to the Care Act, for example, as we've already spoken to. There's 10 categories of abuse as opposed to 4 categories with children and young people. And the process of working with the adult to make sure that their views are taken on board, sort of encompassing all the 6 principles of safeguarding adults and the Mental Capacity Act. Actually, that's why we need to have separate resources available for anyone who we work with, adults, whether they're volunteers or dancers or all participants of the group as well. And I suppose, particularly if you think about it from the user point of view, if you see a safeguarding a policy that applies to a child, yet you're finding yourself in that situation where you're very uncomfortable, or you want to raise a complaint, whether that's a safeguarding complaint, that child one won't be applicable to you. So what do you follow? What is the process for you as that person? If you wanted to raise an issue, where do you go? So if you haven't got anything, it can be very lonely for that person because they've got no avenue to share their voice. So yes, an answer.
Thank you. And of course, we know in the dance world, even with child protection policies, safeguarding policies, nobody in the government is checking. There's no regulator. So it's a question of, is it a question of self-policing, just being mindful to do the right thing? I mean, what's the implication of not having a policy or procedure and somebody complains about something in your organisation?
Well, I think we need to think about why do we need to have that policy in place? So the first thing is about what is your commitment? So where is your starting point as an organisation? What do you believe in? What are your values? What are your beliefs? Is it about providing that safe environment where everyone is included? Everyone has a right to be there, to learn, to develop, to enjoy that situation. So it's really starting from that starting point. And then it's about understanding if somebody's going to share a concern with you, they'll share it whether you're ready for it or not. Because you haven't got a policy won't mean that somebody won't share something with you. So it's much better to be prepared so that if somebody does share something with you, which can be really quite worrying or give you sleepless nights, what do you do with that information? So if you have your policy, actually it guides you through that process. It's really important to put those steps in place so you're prepared rather than reactive to different situations. So that might be concerns coming in from local communities within their neighbourhoods, so really grassroots things which are external. So you know what to do with that. So you've got your network ready, you know where to go for your advice, you've got that sounding board. So that's one avenue. The other avenue is about making sure that the service that you provide is providing that safe service that you want to be able to provide. So it is about being clear and transparent and having a whistleblowing policy as part of that, so that really you want people to be able to voice their concerns before they get escalated. So even if it's worries or niggles, or they feel uncomfortable, I suppose in a dance situation with a particular lift or something like that, how do they share it when it's sort of a lower level before it escalates? So it's making sure that you have that in place so that if things come through, you know what to do with. I suppose the other thing, having been in safeguarding a long time, is that some communities can be very small and everybody knows everyone. So it's really difficult to distance yourself if a concern comes through to you, if you know the parties involved. So by having that policy, it takes out that personal perspective, because actually you're following an agreed procedure, which is tried, tested, robust, and has that quality element. So actually it takes some of that sort of the I suppose that personal pressure off as well. Laura, I don't know if you've got anything you want to add into that.
I haven't actually, but thank you. I thought that was really comprehensive.
Thank you. It's worthwhile looking at this question in the chat, which is, if an organisation is providing recreational activities, should there be, for adults with support needs, so I think we're talking about adults at risk there, should they be registered and regulated by the, is it Care and Quality Commission? I don't know what their remit is.
The CQC, Care Quality Commission.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that question. Do you, Kath? I don't believe so. I mean, I have supported a lot of theatre groups who do this, who have never told us that they are regulated by CQC. You need to be providing care, you know, and that's not your preliminary activity. So as far as I'm aware, but Kath might know differently.
I would say not. So as a recreational activity, yes, you can provide it for those with care and support needs. And I suppose this goes back to your sort of your safe recruitment processes as well. So it might be that you don't necessarily need that DBS check if you're not meeting that threshold as well. So for a lot of the organisations I work with, they won't be in that regulated position, but it's still making sure that we're providing a safe place for people to come to.
And just on that point, if you don't mind me adding, I have worked with quite a few theatres who actively support, within the realms of the theatre, adults with learning disabilities, people with care and support needs. And some of the areas where they've had concerns is where they're actually going above and beyond their role. So actually may be sort of acting in a caring facility when actually they're there to hold a drama class, if that makes sense. So sometimes if we overstep boundaries and don't have safety nets in place, you know, we can create risks. So I would say that you know, is a care worker coming with this person with care and support needs, or do we have things in place to ensure that their needs are met while they're with us for the dance experience?
So what should a dance school, should a dance school have a conversation with the person that's coming into dance and their carer as well, to just talk through the needs in advance?
Yes, I would say so. And I've worked with organisations where they've been given copies of care plans, you know, expectations that might be that as this person requires personal care, etc., then that shouldn't be delivered by a dance teacher. That should be delivered by somebody who is paid to care for that individual. You know, so it's just those kind of things, creating safe professional boundaries. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Kath, because I know obviously you've worked with lots of disability sports, etc., haven't you?
And I suppose the main sort of message we always sort of start with is have the conversation with the adult involved. So how do they want to be included? What works best for them? So it's very, you can't generalize people and put them into boxes and say, well, actually, we're going to put this in place. It's about having that conversation with the person to find out how to best include them and what potentially reasonable adjustments you might need to make, and whether you can make that. So it's about having that open conversation.
And that seems to be a key with adult safeguarding, is the person that you're trying to protect has a voice and their needs must be listened to. Whereas when you're doing child safeguarding, that doesn't seem to feature as much, I would say. Can I ask a question about there's a follow-on, is it worth asking the CQC? We've had experience at Safe for Dance of trying to get authorities to change anything. And Laura Nicholson from One Dance UK and myself are on a DFE group for the out of school sector, which includes dance as well as faith, just sort of Sunday schools and private tutoring. And things go very, very slowly. And they're not very happy to regulate. They don't want to regulate. So it is worth asking, but whether they would, I don't know, because that would cost money. And that seems to be quite key. There's a question I've got. When we think, if a dance school has a child protection policy, a safeguarding policy for children, a safeguarding policy for adults. What about those transition years where you start an academic year when you're 17 and you turn 18? How do we cope with that? Because the children haven't developed that much in the few days in between 17 and 18.
Yeah, but once they hit the age of 18 in law, they become an adult. And actually, it's great working with that age range, because that is when they move to become independent. And we know that young people develop at very different rates as well. So some might continue living at home, some might have left home at the age of 16, but in that case, they'd still be classed as a child at that point. But if somebody comes to you with a concern once they hit the age of 18, you need to know how to manage that. So it might be that you don't refer to children's services, but you refer to adult services. So it's quite distinct about which process and policy you would follow within that. But a lot of it is also about abuse doesn't stop at 17. Once you become an adult, actually you can still be vulnerable or more at risk of abuse. And I mean, I think we all know what's been happening within the media and with dance lately, with Strictly and other things that we've all seen, and ballet and different things as well. It's about making sure that people have their voice and a channel to have their voice, and knowing what might seem as normalised isn't normalised, and actually if they feel worried about something, that they know what to do with that concern and where to go with it as well. So just because somebody becomes an adult doesn't mean that they don't become open to sort of abuse, but it's knowing what to do to support that individual with that as well.
Just one thing to add from my experience with people who work with people who stay with them through that transitionary age, the two big pitfalls are still treating them like a child over the age of 18, and getting over involved in their lives and maybe making decisions for them that they are able to make themselves, or on the flip side saying, oh well, you're 18 now, off you go, you're on your own. So that those are some of the biggest sort of issues that I see, where actually we can still provide a listening ear and signposting and talking to people over the age of 18, but it's just that understanding, as you say, it is a crucial time.
It's interesting because one concern we had come through, and I'll keep it anonymous, was it was a 19-year-old who was showing signs of self-harming, and actually this safeguarding officer wanted to contact the next of kin to tell them that they were self-harming, and basically to pass back the responsibility, because what if they know this information and they're not doing anything with it? And so we started probing into it, saying, well, with this 19-year-old, have they even had that conversation with their parent? Is the parent part of the problem? Is that person even living at home still, or have they moved away from home? What does the person think about that? Do they want help, to have that conversation? Do they want support themselves? So again, it's sort of moving away from what you would do to a child or young person, but really thinking about that adult and what do they need, and what would work best for them. Because sometimes if you took a decision, it could be the wrong decision unless you've had that conversation with them. So that was just this one example.
Before I give you an opportunity to sort of talk through the roadmap which the Ancraft Trust has developed, what would you say is the ideal thing? If you said actually every dance school in Britain should have these policies, what would you like to see to protect both children and adults?
That's a really good question. I suppose it's that journey. Things cannot be done overnight. We know that, but we need to move to this place where actually we are providing those safe spaces, those fantastic dancing opportunities where people go in, have an amazing time, love it, make friends, learn, develop, and if they want to pursue a career in it, then actually they're supported throughout that career as well. But also it's that links to the local community, so that if people do come in who are struggling, and actually it's all part of the social prescribing agenda as well, where the GPs and people in health practices are working to encourage people to take a more active lifestyle on. So actually, if they come through from different backgrounds and bring with them some worries or stresses or concerns which might fall into a safeguarding nature, we've then got the links to put them in contact with the right people. So we're not expected to be those social workers, but actually what we can do is find somebody who can help them. So it's really linking in, because with dance, I imagine, I don't know what your reach is, hundreds of thousands, but actually, for those who need support, what is your reach, and how can you support those through building really good networks? Would be my thing. I don't know, Peter, what would you say?
What would I say? I mean, it's a journey towards having, I think policies and procedures are very important, know what to do, but it's also about openness to learning. We've got some resources on our website on consent and touch. And that was originally through the lens of children, but it's for everybody. I did a pantomime rehearsal last night, and I did a safeguarding talk at the first rehearsal last week, and we talked about how you should really think about when you touch somebody, even if you've been asked to by the director. And we had an example where we were told to move each other as if we were Barbie dolls. So I don't know what this is going to look like on stage, but it was like, and because I had a safeguarding talk, everyone was asking for consent, was saying, can I put my hand there to move that? If you don't, I'll just indicate and you move your, and that was really positive. And virtually everybody in that room was an adult. There were a few children there as well. But actually, some of the things we've been thinking about at Safer Dance, and we've created resources, would apply to adults just as much as children, I would say. So so keep thinking about the idea of things that you think may improve safeguarding could be for adults as part of practice, not just because it's part of the child protection policy, I would say. Do you want to, you have a small PowerPoint about the roadmap that you developed?
Yeah.
And then we come to the question in the chat. Yeah.
Let me just share my screen again. Yeah, so the roadmap, hopefully that showed. So just to give you a little bit.
Not quite yet.
Has it come up?
Yeah, no.
Got it. Excellent. So just to give you a bit of background for this, as we said earlier, we carry out audits for organisers and charities who request those. We also have a framework for specific sport and activity organisations to complete, where they fill in all the paperwork and an independent person would assess their submission and basically give them a view of where they currently are, look at areas of weaknesses and how to develop. This sort of takes it down to another stage. So this is very much a hand-holding tool, a self-developmental tool. So for people who are starting on the journey to safeguard adults, sometimes it's really hard to know, where do you start? What do you need? What does good look like? So we've developed this roadmap really to encourage people to self-learn, self-develop, and work on their own policies and procedures as we go through. So, and this is all available, it's free, it's on the website. So if I just pop this on here, so it does try to provide that minimum standard. So it's helping organisations understand what they need to comply with their legal obligations, guiding organisations to implement and embed good practice in terms of safeguarding adults, identify any areas and where you might need to signpost for extra support, and have the confidence as well to know that what you've got in place is effective and working really well. So that was sort of the ethos behind it. It's divided up into 6 stages. So the first one, is identifying and assessing risk. And what we try to do here is, rather than take something off the shelf, is just really focus on who are you working with, where are you working with them, how are you working with them? So are you bringing in extra staff, volunteers? Are you doing outreach work? Are they all coming to a centre? Because once you've got that, then you can begin to think about all the safeguarding arrangements that you need to put in place. So, for example, facilitating an outdoors running session from a recreational ground will have very different safeguarding considerations as opposed to, say, running a yoga group within a village hall, for example. So you have to really take everything as unique. So that's your starting point. And then once you've got that, then you can begin to sort of develop your plans around that. So the 6 stages is starting at that very basic stage, so identifying risk, then leading on to leadership and responsibility. So it's a bit like opening up a can of worms. If you open the door to say, hey, we're ready, you know, we want to hear your concerns, we want to be able to answer them and help you. Actually, you've got to put a lot in place before then. You've got to know how to manage that. You've got to have had that education, that training. How are you going to record this information? Where are you going to store it? How are you going to share it? What's your sharing policy, for example? So there's a lot of work which needs to be done first. Then it's developing and learning. So again, it's making sure that the key volunteers and staff are upskilled so they know what the signs and symptoms are, for example, of safeguarding adults and what to put in place. As we move through, it moves on to communicating and implementing. So again, it's you might have your policy, but how can you make that sort of resonate with the groups that you work with the participants who come into your dance studios? So what's the language you're using? And it might be that actually you need to change that as well. So it could be visual, for example, or it could be on your website, or it could be a blog or a podcast, whatever works for you. Then it's about reviewing and adapting. So once you've begun to put all the processes in place, having been in safeguarding a long time and relied very heavily on policy and procedure, you always get that different one which comes through, and that's a grey area. So once you've gone through your safeguarding case, it's what do we need to do to strengthen that? How can we get rid of those grey areas so we can really sort of make sure that we're comfortable, that if something comes through, we know what to do with it. And then the last bit is about embedding an organisational learning. So it's finding that point where actually, yeah, I'm really comfortable. We are providing that safe environment. We're a shining good practice. You know, we want to share this with other organisations as well. So it's sort of taking people on the journey. So that's the 6 different things. We tend to find that at the Ancraft Trust, people come to us when they want a policy. And it's like, I just need a template policy because I need to apply for some funding. So what we've tried to do is say, okay, well, that's great that you want a policy, but let's take you back up to stage 1. So your policy reflects your organisation and who you're working with. So I won't recap on this completely. I think I've said it anyway. So say, you know, stage 1, it is about looking at where you work, when you work, how you work, what you provide, and what your responsibility is for adults. So again, it's making sure that you undertake that snapshot view of what governance arrangements you've got in place, what your day-to-day operations look like, and what your current policies and procedures are in place with that as well. The second stage is the leadership and responsibility. So again, right, as we said right at the beginning, what is your commitment? What are your values? What are your beliefs? What culture are you trying to create? So, and how that will be resourced. So, you know, who's going to fund it? Who's going to invest it? Have you got a committee to help you with this? And what safe recruitment processes do you have in place as well? This is what it looks like. So it's an interactive PD document. So under each stage, there'll be a statement. And this is very much a learning tool. So if you don't know what an adult's rep might be on your committee, then we've got example job roles, for example. So for everything, we've tried to guide you to either templates that we've created or sharing best practice from within the wider sector as well. So if somebody's got a really good statement of intent or a strategy, then we've tried to signpost that just to sort of show you what good looks like. So it's really hard to know otherwise. Stage 3, as I mentioned earlier, is all about developing and learning. So it's about developing your policy once you've undertake that original look at where you're at and what you provide. Making sure your safe recruitment processes are in place. And we know that DBS checks for the adult workforce is different to that of children and young people, and it might not be applicable for you to apply for a DBS check. But what can you put in addition to that? So is there an application form? Are you providing training? Do you look at references? Do you provide supervision, for example? There's other things as well. Then it's about developing your procedures for managing those concerns. So what do you do if somebody shares a concern? concern? How do you manage that? Having up-to-date code of conduct is really important as well, because it really takes away the assumption that people know how to behave appropriately and what appropriate is, because it's quite ambiguous. So what we try to explain within the code of conduct is, what is acceptable and what isn't, and what happens if they're breached. It makes it a lot clearer if something happens and actually that sits outside that code of conduct, because you say, well, actually, this isn't in line with what we expect within our organisation. And the last bit of that is identifying training needs. Stage 4, again, is about that communication, as I've already said. So it's making sure that you've got ways and means of sort of making sure that this is accessible to all who want to use your facilities. Then it's the reviewing and adapting. So again, it's if you get no safeguarding concerns, I'd probably worry, because there's always a concern of some sort. It might not be something that you need to refer on, but actually it's making sure that those are answered. So it's making sure that you try and test your policy and procedures. And finally, as I mentioned before, the embedding and organisational learning. And that's probably the hardest part, because how do we really meet that end point? Because with safeguarding, it's always evolving, we're always developing, we're always learning. So again, it's trying to move everything forwards. So that's just a snapshot view of the roadmap. It's much clearer on the website, and like I say, it's just a free resource should you wish to use it.
Perfect, thank you so much. The question that Gillian's put into the chat really, hopefully, has answered a lot of it through that conversation, because the question is, how can we support the participants from teachers who abuse or who have poor practice? Safer recruitment, make sure you're recruiting the right people. And I think the code of conduct, very important that they know what the expectations are and they're trained on it, and that there's policy so that people can complain. And of course, you have to, if you run a dance school, you have to make sure people have access to the complaints procedure so they know that they're allowed to complain. My question is, if they aren't satisfied, what tends to happen is that in child protection, you can phone the local authority, you can phone the local authority designated officer. What happens with adults? Who would they complain to?
And this is part of the big discussions that's going on, and it's not just within dance as well, and it's knowing where to escalate it to. So you can contact the adult safeguarding team to see whether they might respond to this as well, but it's a really tricky one. And I think it sort of, if it's a business, it sort of goes right back to the beginning, where it's trying to build on the good, reputable dance schools which are out there, which will attract people to come to, and not promoting those which don't. So it's a very, very tricky area, and one that we're still advocating for, to try and close this loophole. It's very, very tricky.
So in theory, if there's a dance teacher who is abusing in all sorts of ways the participants who are coming to dance, then hopefully the owner of the dance school will have procedures in place to retrain or dismiss that person. And then it's a question of whether it's something that needs to be if it's a position where we need an adult, say a DBS check, then you can refer to the DBS. And I suppose anyone can refer anybody to the DBS, because they will analyse what that referral is and decide whether to make a record on someone's DBS check. But you also have recourse to the police as well. The Teachers Regulation Agency is really only for teachers with qualified teacher status, Kate. So that's people who are qualified to teach in state schools in the UK, well, in England actually, rather than UK. So you could, but they wouldn't accept a report if that person isn't a qualified teacher, as in a state school, mainstream school teacher. But we've had conversations within Safer Dance as to, if there's an allegation against a dance teacher, can you tell other dance organisations? So if organisation A has an allegation, when can they tell organisation B? And we've realised that's a really dangerous GDPR thing to start passing allegations around. So the advice is to always go through the local authority to the LADO and tell them that this person also has a dance teacher in these organizations, and they can then contact those organizations because they have really robust data protection policies as well. But when it's adults, it's a question about other dance organizations taking up references. So you won't provide reference, and if you are taking up on a new teacher, you should be asking for who their current employer was, or latest employer, to get a reference. So your own safe recruitment should shut people out. But that's a dream, that somebody isn't hopping around from one dance school to the other. And of course, they could go from one country to the other, which is quite common even in teaching. Somebody can avoid being caught up for their past misdemeanors as well.
And I think it is looking at it's you have to look at that situation, because the incident might have happened with another adult, but that person might also be teaching children as well. It's sometimes you just get a snippet of information which can be the top of the iceberg, and actually you don't know what else is under there and where else they're teaching and whether they're going into school settings or whatever. So again, using the local authority and the tools that you have to sort of move the case forward would be really useful as well.
I would always advocate for people to contact the local authority. You don't need consent to get advice, you know, and you can with that, confidentiality wise, you can contact the local authority, explain the situation, and they can let you know whether that's something that they want you to pick up, you know. So it's use them as a sounding board and use them for advice. I also wondered, you know, there may be instances where the police may need to be involved depending on what the kind of conduct is. So yeah, it's difficult, but there are various routes that you can take for that advice. I just wanted to say as well, having strong signposting in place for participants who may have been abused or malpractice, you know, is their local, refer them to local counselling or charities, you know, so that you're showing support to the person that it may have happened to as well. Thanks.
And quite a few teachers will be a registered teacher of an organisation like the ROD, the ISTD, the IDTA. It's worthwhile telling them, because they have their own procedures which won't be as high a threshold as the police, because they will have their own code of conduct if you want to stay a registered teacher. So just put in a complaint there. Mike, who is a member of the Safe Dance Committee, has put down some training that he's negotiated with the NSPCC. Would the Ancroft Trust consider something similar?
Yes.
Trying to sell things, Mike. What am I?
Yeah, sorry, I'm on the blag. I like that. Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think you'll find our prices are quite reasonable anyway. So, but yes, please do make contact. And I'm not sure whether it would be yourself, Kath, or my department.
Yeah,
we'd fight over it.
Yeah, we would. And in terms of an introduction to safeguarding adults, we've got a brand new e-learning course, which is aimed at the sport and activity sector. Peter, I know you've been through the course. We have made some slight changes since then. So it has all been updated and refreshed. So that is a brand new course. So very similar to the NSPCC, which focuses on children. This is specifically for adults as well. So that's a new course. And so that if you register as an organisation with a number of different dance teachers that you want to put through, again, the higher the numbers, the bigger the discount with that as well. So please do come to us, because we can sort of negotiate. And again, if it's face-to-face training, then it would either come through to Laura or me or whoever to pick that up through the main Ancroft Trust inquiries. But Laura, did you want to mention about the new financial abuse?
Yes. So thank you, Kath. So another thing that we do at Ancroft Trust is we get involved in research projects that are part of the University of Nottingham. And there was a research project between the link of poor financial capability and the risk of financial abuse. So if you have, you know, a lack of confidence and lack of skills around finances, how you may be more at risk of financial abuse. So we've luckily got 1,000 free places. I'm not really sure how many have been taken so far, but it's a free course that you can have a look at on our website. I'm happy to send the link, or other Laura's been finding links very well. So it's on our website. We're currently working on another project as well as a up-to-date Mental Capacity Act course, and that one, which is an e-learning, and we're hoping that's going to be out around December time. So I think with learning, keep an eye on our website, because we are constantly trying to update things to keep abreast of what's happening in the safeguarding world.
Thinking about courses, talking to the NSPCC doesn't have a specific dance safeguarding course, but they're open to lobbying if we can find enough people to say that actually this would meet their demand for the cost of transforming their children one into their sport one into a dance one. So I'll be mentioning that to members to see whether we can get enough interest that they would consider doing that, or if anybody has any funding to support that. I know that charities can support charities.
Just one thing to say as well, maybe I'm on the blag, but we do deliver a lot of bespoke training courses, and what we pride ourselves on is making sure it fits the industry. So we would make sure that the case studies and everything was relevant to the environments that you're working in. So if people felt they needed that, that's another thing that you could contact for.
Super. We've got about 8 minutes left. Do we have any further? I haven't seen anything else in the chat. I don't know whether there seems to be a Q&A button as well, which I haven't seen anyone use for that. But the chat's much easier. It's not too much coming through.
I suppose I could use this time just to talk about the Ancraft Trust, the conference and Safeguarding Adults Week that we've got coming up. So let me just reshare my screen. So Safeguarding Adults Week is a week in November that has been probably running for the last, I don't know how many years, Laura, quite a few years now. So it's
I think 10 at least, should know that.
And the focus of this is really to generate some good conversations. So for organisations who want to sort of get behind it, use it as a platform to talk about how you safeguard adults within your activity. Throughout the week, we always have different themes. So this year it's all about working in partnership. And each day has a slightly different focus. So the first day is about professional curiosity. So on our website, we run a range of different free webinars on topics. So again, it's about registering if you want to sort of attend one of those. It also ties in with our AGM as well. So on the Monday, we sort of have our AGM and a seminar as well. And they're really well supported. And we bring in external organisations to support us. And I suppose particularly when we're talking about safeguarding adults, there are 10 categories of abuse. So when we're trying to bring in those organisations which have the additional expertise, who we work with really closely as well, so we can sort of double act on that. On the Tuesday, again, it's about working in partnership. Off the top of my head, I can't remember who is running that seminar, Laura. I don't know if you can. We can quickly have a look at that. On the Wednesday, it's when we have our conference, and that's held at Nottingham Trent University. It's from 9 till 4, and again we have a whole range of different subject topics. So we've got the DBS coming in specifically to talk about harm and harm from outside of the activity, and the transferable harm with that. We've also got a session run where we're looking at, as we mentioned before, out of those 600 cases which get referred to the adult safeguarding team and the 400 don't meet that threshold, we've got a session looking to unpick that, what happens to those situations where they're serious enough to refer and do need that level of support, and what can we put in place to sort of help those people. On the Thursday, we've got recognising exploitation, and I think that's about county lines. I think we've got a webinar set up for that one. And then on Friday, we're looking at professional learning. So we're working with an organisation based in Wales to deliver a session on that as well. So do take a look at our website. I don't know if you've got any more information on those, Laura.
I was just going to say, actually, it's me on Tuesday,
yes,
which is the free webinar. Also at the conference, in my team, which you might find interesting, I think it's relevant to community work. I've done a lot of work with religious and faith groups, and I've done a lot of training within a Hare Krishna temple, a Gurdwara, all these different places. And we're actually presenting a workshop around spiritual abuse and abuse within those areas with a gentleman, the Reverend Tom Wilson. So that will be another hopefully interesting thing that's at the conference on the Wednesday. But the Tuesday is the free webinar.
Super. And I have my ticket for the Wednesday.
Oh, fabulous.
Let's see you in person for the first time. Excellent. So if there are no further questions, I'd like to say thank you, Laura. Thank you, Kath. It's I don't want people who are on this webinar and members of Safer Dance to think is another thing I've got to think about for safeguarding. It is about making your dance schools more accessible, a better place to learn, and for you to feel more comfortable that if something happens, you've already got a policy and procedure in place. I think that's really important. Laura.
I just wanted to say as well, as Kath said, it is a long process, and as you've just said, Peter, and it can feel intimidating. One thing we do say is, why don't you look at a safeguarding action plan or a strategy where you're setting yourself timescales, actually achievable timescales, what you feel is most important, and doing that, and it just sort of feels a bit less intimidating. What are your priorities? What do you need to do to make the situation immediately safe? And then what can you do to keep building that and embedding and improving the culture of your organisation?
Excellent, thank you. I'll put in the chat my email address if you want to join Safer Dance. It is completely free. Safer Dance doesn't even have a bank account. I am literally just putting the things on a website myself and being supported by people giving all their time freely. So we've got 108 members. Which is fantastic, and we are starting to have an impact on industry, which is what we're here for. So thank you, Laura. Thank you, Kath.